So before we go into the video, I want to give you a little bit of background so you can follow easily. This was on Sunday morning, April 21st, 1918. The Richthofen's wing, his fighter squadrons, were based around the Cappy airfield and close by. But that particular day, it was fogged in. But Richthofen always kept his men ready, so they always stayed close to the airplanes. Normally they would be in cots sitting out on the field and ready to go once the weather was cleared. And of course, since Richthofen himself had shot down 2 airplanes the day before, then they were celebrating those victories. And of course, the wing itself had been very successful. And Richthofen was generally a pretty modest guy, but he was also in good moods because he was getting ready to go hunting with a good friend of his. And so he playfully turned over a cot, one of the pilots that was resting, and then later, a few minutes later, he did the same thing to another pilot. And in retaliation, several of the pilots got together and tied a chalk to the tail of the Great Dane of Richthofen. And of course, the dog went chasing his master to get a little assistance. By about 10:30 in the morning, the strong wind, and this time from the east. Normally the winds blew from the west. That was typical, and so that was in the German armies and aviators' favor, because when you're doing aerial combat, the wind is not working against you, it's keeping you over German lines. But this particular day, almost as an omen, it was blowing the opposite direction. But they did receive word there were 2 flights of Sopwith Camels approaching the front, and in less than 5 minutes, Richthofen and his team was airborne. That's how fast they could get these airplanes airborne. And they also joined up with Jasta 5, a group from Jasta 5, another squadron, fighter squadron. At about 10:30, 3 sections of 5 aircraft from British 209 Squadron, these were led by Captain Roy Brown, who plays into our story, an American pilot who was Oliver Laboutier, and O.W. Redgate. They departed their base at Bertangles, just north of Amiens. And Cappy, notice that Cappy was about 20 miles from Amiens in a straight line. So, as I said, Richthofen, and that's how he got the name Traveling Circus, is he took his colorful aircraft and traveled to where the action was, so he'd be most effective. The German aircraft headed west from Cappy to cover any German 2-seaters. They were doing reconnaissance work and giving information to the gunners and that sort of thing. But they also wanted to engage any British aircraft who were doing the same type of thing. And soon they spotted some RE-8 machines, and they were taking photographs and directing artillery fire. And about the time they went to engage these RE-8s, the Camels of Brown's and Laboutier's flights arrived on the scene, and of course battle ensued. And as I said, on this particular day we had new pilots from both sides. Richthofen had his cousin Wolfram von Richthofen with him, and he was told to stay out of the fray. And Roy Brown had a new person himself from Canada, Wilfred May, and he was also instructed to just kind of stay out of the way and not to try to enter the fray until they get some more exposure. Well, as things would have it, May spotted Wolfram and decided he was going to attack, and he was soon drawn into the battle. Unfortunately, as I said earlier, the tendency for new people was to trigger the machine gun too long and cause it to malfunction and freeze up because of the heat that it generated. So of course, Richthofen, with his excellent vision and keep an eye on his people, especially his cousin, he saw May attack Wolfram and went after him. And by this time, May decided, since his guns weren't operating, he was going to hightail it home. and he dived down towards the Somme River, and of course Richthofen tore after him. The problem was they were also going over British lines as he was pursuing them. As we said, one of the things that was uncharacteristic was that Richthofen was following a enemy fighter pilot too far into enemy territory. And as I said, the winds were causing havoc as well because they were blowing Richthofen and May over even further from the other side. Now, May's Sopwith Camel was faster, a little bit faster than the triplane, but of course, May was maneuvering around the river and over treetops and that sort of thing, and Richthofen was able to catch him and stay right behind him because of his more experience in flying. Now, normally, Richthofen could have taken May out pretty quickly, but he was having trouble with his guns. One of the guns was jammed, and the other had a broken firing pin, and it was jamming intermittently. And so he had to take off his shoulder harness and constantly lean forward to operate the cocking handle mechanism on the machine gun to even get any rounds off at all. So he was really being persistent when he shouldn't have been. So, of course, low flying around that area held by the Australians attracted a lot of attention. So there was numerous machine gunners and people with rifles that were firing up at the red triplane as it moved down the valley. Meanwhile, Roy Brown was up there and saw Wilfred May being attacked by the red triplane, and he was concerned as well. But he was at higher altitude, 4,000 or 5,000 feet, and he initiated a pretty fast dive in about a 40-knot overtake speed, and he approached the triplane from above and to the left of Richthofen, and shot a few shots, and then pulled out and pulled away. Richthofen at that point continued his pursuit of May for a few moments, but then both of his guns failed, and he finally decided to abandon the pursuit. There were, as I said, several machine gunners about, as there were individual people carrying rifles, but there was a Australian anti-aircraft Lewis machine gunner, Sergeant Cedric Popkin, that had a couple of opportunities to fire at the Red Baron, and we'll see in a minute whether or not that was possible and likely that happened. The single .303 bullet actually killed the Red Baron. It passed through his heart. But in spite of the fact that he was fatally injured, Richthofen was apparently able to land the aircraft. The triplane was extremely difficult to fly. You had to fly it all the time. It's not like modern day aircraft that you just release the controls and the aircraft will generally right itself. But he was able to shut down his engine and do a pancake landing. And so right after that, of course, he died. So as I said, he was killed on Sunday, April 21st, 1918, about a week before his 26th birthday. His body was taken to the base of the Australian squadron, and then the next afternoon he was given a military funeral, and out of respect, buried next to their own men. And we'll just cover just briefly, as we said, and as they covered, there were three major theories. One was that Roy Brown shot him down from the air. Two, that machine gunners, Bowie and Evans actually shot him down. And of course the third was that Cedric Popkin did so. As we said, he was fatally wounded April 21st, flying low over Marlin Coal Ridge. He was in a low altitude pursuit, and he was attacked by Arthur Ray Brown from the left side above, behind and above. And then he was also likely shot by Cedric Popkin. And because this was behind and from the right side. Again, it passed through his heart, and severe damage, of course, fatal damage. This is a picture of von Richthofen and his dad. His dad was a major in the military. We're running short on time, but he had to basically retire from the military for a while because he had jumped in the icy waters to save somebody that had fallen off his horse at one point in time and lost his hearing, or most of his hearing. Richthofen's head here is bandaged from a incident that happened on July 6, 1917, where he was hit by a round that hit his head. It's about a 4-inch gash in his head. I'm not sure where that came from, whether it's from enemy fire or not. Most likely it's actually from one of his own men, because you typically would clear your guns to make sure they're working, and somebody may have gotten a stray shot off. It got him in the back of the head right here, and it never really healed till the end of his life. So if you see what we're talking about here, these were some researchers that said that that the damage to his head actually affected his thinking, and he had target fixations, and he was moody, and he apparently had traumatic brain injury at the time, and he tended to be less jovial, miserable, bad spirits, and impulsive. So those all would tend to lead you to think that maybe perhaps those characteristics that he exhibited that day were because of that. Quickly on machine guns, as I said, one was jammed, the other was broken firing pin. Had to lean forward. One reason why you saw the damaged face, because he obviously hit the control panel, the machine gun butts, when he hit the ground, because he didn't have his shoulder harness on. He did make a landing and died about 15-20 seconds later, and of course was buried at Bertangles near Amiens, and then eventually in Berlin, and then Wiesbaden. So he's now at Wiesbaden near Frankfurt, Germany. So this is Manfred von Richthofen, 25 years of age.